The war on terror, ladies and gentlemen, you remember that? Well, now we're what, in year 11? And the Republicans on television, on the Yak shows this morning, Sunday morning, are hammering the Obama administration for the events in Libya. Libya, oh Libya. And particularly saying that the original story on the Benghazi incident, which resulted in the assassination of 4 Americans, including our ambassador to Libya. The original explanation brought forward by the administration, which was that this was a result of demonstrations against that stupid trailer of a film, Innocence of Muslims, was a soft peddling of what the administration knew or should have known, which was that this was, as the administration has itself later admitted, a terrorist attack, a well-armed, well-planned terrorist attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi. The Republican attack then goes on to say that the administration is doing this because they would like to pretend, that as Darrell Issa said, he said, I'm going to say something that's not Republican. This was a mission accomplished moment where the administration is trying to pretend that they've won, and yet Al-Qaeda is still active, he says. That this attack in Benghazi represents that. What he did not go on to say, what nobody goes on to say, is maybe after 11 years, the war model of fighting terrorism has been proven not to work, 2 wars, and if they're still active, maybe an empirical analysis would say the way the Germans and the Italians fought terrorism in the 1970s was, I don't know, maybe. Empirical, who knows? Ladies and gentlemen, anyway, the war on terror goes on. In a motion unsealed last week, the United States government proposed new ground rules for, I'll get to that in a moment. That would be the punchline. First, there's this. They're supposed to be one of the centerpieces of our counterterrorism strategy, according to the Secretary of Homeland Security. These are the DHS's 70-plus fusion centers, places where state, local, and federal law enforcement analyze and share information. The Senate's bipartisan Committee on Investigations found no evidence that they uncovered a single terrorist threat between April 1, 2009 and April 30th, 2010. During that time, the FBI discovered a subway attacker, a major, killed 13 people at Fort Hood, guy tried to blow up a Detroit-bound airplane, and somebody attempted to detonate an SUV in Times Square. The fusion centers didn't uncover any of this. DHS has praised the fusion centers' work. The Senate found fusion centers played little, if any, role in the cases. Nor, the Senate panel writes in its just-released report, according to Wired, analyzing more than 80,000 fusion center documents, could the inquiry identify a contribution such fusion center reporting made to disrupt an active terrorist plot. Unnamed DHS officials told the panel the fusion centers produce, quote, predominantly useless information and, quote, a bunch of crap, unquote. Well, that's what gives the parts of the men's room, I'm not going to sponsor a bad name. An internal 2010 assessment, which Department of Homeland Security did not share with Congress, found that a third of all the fusion centers don't have defined procedures for sharing intelligence, which is one of the prime reasons for their existence. At least 4 fusion centers identified by the Department of Homeland Security do not exist, according to the Senate report. Where are those fusion centers? We lost they rolled under they're behind the couch, they rolled under the thing. Those that do are hives of incompetence, bureaucracy, mission creep. You remember him. He hangs around. And possible civil liberties abuses. Despite instituting privacy protections, the Senate report says DHS continued to store troubling intelligence reports from fusion centers on U.S. persons, possibly in violation of the Privacy Act. A third of reviewed reports from these centers lacked, quote, any useful information on terrorism, or they possibly violated civil liberties. Other reports sat for months until their information was obsolete by the time it was published. Instead of focusing on terrorism, quote, most information from the centers was about ordinary crimes such as drug, cash, or human smuggling, according to the report. Fusion centers are only supposed to analyze and spread information, not collect it. Along the way, they scooped up Items like a leaflet for the Mongols Motorcycle Club in California telling bikers to be courteous to police. 5 centers the Senate studied spent their federal terrorism grant money on hidden shirt-button cameras, cell phone tracking systems, and on things like dozens of flat-screen TVs and SUVs, claiming that Chevrolet Tahoes were intended to help respond to chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosive incidents. The DHS doesn't appear to care how it spends its cash. The Senate inquiry determined that Homeland Security was unable to produce a complete and accurate tally of the expense of its support. For fusion centers, its estimates range between $289 million and $1.4 billion. Nice range. DHS, therefore, doesn't even know how much money it's spent on what it calls a centerpiece of its counterterrorism strategy. But centerpieces are overrated. Look at the periphery. Also, in this struggle, let's look for a moment at the new Iraq. You remember Iraq? Fallujah, or as I called it, Fallujah, was host to one of the bloodiest battles of the Iraq War. Its residents changed the name of their city from City of Mosques to the Polluted City after the United States had 2 massive military campaigns there. Now, 1 month before the World Health Organization reveals its view on the legacy of those 2 battles, the Independent on Sunday newspaper in London reports a staggering rise in birth defects among Iraqi children conceived in the aftermath of the war. High rates of miscarriage, toxic levels of lead and mercury contamination, spiraling numbers of birth defects ranging from congenital heart defects to brain dysfunctions, and malformed limbs have been recorded. Even more disturbingly, they appear to be occurring at an increasing rate in children born in Fallujah. There is compelling evidence to link the increased numbers of defects and miscarriages to military assaults, says Mosgan Fahani, one of the lead authors of the report, and an environmental toxicologist at the University of Michigan. Similar defects have been found among children born in Basra after British troops invaded there, according to this same research. The new findings published in the Environmental Contamination and Toxicology Bulletin will bolster claims that U.S. and NATO munitions used in the conflict led to a widespread health crisis in Iraq. Why do they hate us? They are latest in a series of studies that have suggested a link between bombardment and a rise in birth defects. This prompted a World Health Organization inquiry. Their report will be out next month. The latest study found in Fallujah more than half of all babies surveyed were born with a birth defect between 2007 and 2010. Before the siege, that was 1 in 10. Prior to the turn of the millennium, fewer than 2% of babies were born with a defect. More than 45% of all pregnancies surveyed ended in miscarriage in the 2 years after the bombing, up from only 10% before. Between 2007 and 2010, 1 in 6 of all pregnancies ended in miscarriage. That'll keep the population of Iraqi. The new research, which looked at the health histories of 56 families in Fallujah, also examined births in Basra. The authors linked the rising number of babies born with birth defects in the 2 cities to increased exposures to metals released by bombs and bullets used over the past 2 decades. They found that levels of lead were 5 times higher in the hair of children with birth defects than other children. Mercury levels were 6 times higher. Children with defects in Basra had 3 times more lead in their teeth than children living in non-impacted areas. The lead researcher said for the first time there's a footprint of metal in the population, compelling evidence linking the staggering increases in Iraqi birth defects to neurotoxic metal contamination. She called the epidemic a public health crisis. You are so welcome, Iraq. No need. And now, finally, in the war on terror, we're still not supposed to know what we know, even though we know it. In a motion unsealed last week, the U.S. government proposed new ground rules for classified information in the trial of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and 4 others charged with the 9/11 attacks. The new order says the accused cannot talk about their observations and experiences of being held by the CIA, including, quote, the enhanced interrogation techniques that were applied to the accused, unquote. That is, waterboarding. The government maintains many details of the CIA's detention program are still classified despite widespread disclosures and an official acknowledgement by President Bush in 2006. quote, due to these individuals' exposure to classified sources, methods, or activities of the United States, an order filed in April read, anything the men say, the suspects, is, quote, presumed to contain information classified as top secret, unquote. So they can't say that they were, but I can say this.
Well, it may not be legal, but it sure as heck makes me safer. And it may not yield useful intel, at least that's what they say. But it's a pleasure so rare, seeing captives gulp air. Let's go waterboarding USA.
It's classified.
Let's go. It's not torture if I say it ain't. Those conventions are so old and quaint. Terrorists are gonna have some fun. Keep America number one. So let's do what we say we never ever do. No way. Let's go waterboarding USA. Well, it's nothing like surfing, 'cause you can't get off if you want to. And it's really hard work, but for us it feels much more like play. If the tables were turned, we'd feel really burned. But let's go waterboarding USA. Let's go boarding. It's not torture if I say it ain't. Those conventions are so old and quaint. Terrorists are gonna have some fun. Keep America number one. So let's make all the suspects really, really have to pray. Let's go waterboarding USA. Waterboarding. It's not torture if I say it ain't. Those conventions are so old and quaint. Terrorists are gonna have some fun. Keep America